This is Jack Zenger, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Retain and Train, 3 data-driven approaches for developing others. Today, there will be 4 of the ZF team who will be working with us on this webinar. Myself, my colleague, Joe Folkman, a world-renowned psychometrician, third person on our who will appear with us is Jill Mancini, a regional VP who has some information to share at the end of the webinar. Jill, just say hi if you would to the people so they'll recognize your voice.
Hello, everyone. At the end of the webinar, I'll be offering some ideas for taking action. So thanks for hanging in there.
And the fourth and really important person here will be Jennifer Lambert, one of our senior client executives who will be our chat host today. Joe and I are incapable of doing too many things at the same time, and so she will be answering your questions and responding to any inquiries that you would have. So Joe, let me turn it to you and get us started.
Oh, thanks so much, Jack, and it's a delight to be here. We're going to talk about developing others. And if you look at that one competency, what we've got here is data from 97,000 leaders. And we looked at your effectiveness on developing others and your overall effectiveness. and what it's showing you there is basically, if you're good at developing others, it has a direct effect on how you're perceived as a leader in an overall way. But not only that, it also affects engagement of your direct reports. A leader who is really good at developing others really increases the engagement of the people that work for them. I mean, if you go to work every day and you work hard, that's a job. But if you go to work every day and you work hard and you learn a new skill, that's more than a job. That's a career. And leaders who develop others get higher levels of engagement, but they also get a higher percentage of people who are willing to go the extra mile. Every employee every day makes a decision. Am I going to do the least amount of work possible to keep my job? Am I going to do a little bit more than that? Or am I going to give you all my energy and effort? The value of discretionary effort is you get twice as much value out of an employee who's willing to give more effort. And as you see here, if you're really bad at developing others, you only get 16%. If you're excellent at the 90th percentile, you can see you get 64% of your employees willing to go the extra mile. The last slide I'm going to show you here on this topic is around the intention to leave the organization. We believe and we know there's a connection between developing others and retaining talent. And right now, that's a big issue for a lot of organizations. And you can see here that if you're bad at developing others, 47% of your employees are thinking about leaving the organization. And if you're great, only 14%. So that's the impact. And Jack, there's just a lot of impact that leaders have from being good at this. But the last thing I'm going to show you is a little bit about the importance of developing others. It's rated 9th in most important, which is not the most, but it's not the least. It's important, it's critical. But if you look over there at direct reports, it's actually rated 6th. And you know, those direct reports, that's a key element to their working experience is having a leader who thinks that developing them is an important part of the job.
Okay, so what my colleague Joe Folkman did was to analyze our database, which has 1.5 million 360-degree feedback instruments in it. And by analyzing the data and looking at those approaches or styles that leaders take who are very good at developing others, the analysis kind of revealed 3 approaches or styles which typify how they go about it. One of them was a person who is a very supportive champion. This is the person who encourages other people, who supports them. They become kind of a raving fan of their subordinates. And so this approach, this being supportive, being an ardent advocate for the individual, was one very dominant style or approach that we saw emerge. The second was a little bit different. This is the leader who approaches it by kind of challenging, and he or she becomes the orchestrator of this individual's development, looking for assignments and special tasks and things that would particularly help this person to grow and develop. And they're very good about following through and really making certain that the person pursues their developmental objectives and targets. And the third style that emerged was the person who loves to teach, the expert, the person who wants more direct involvement in their subordinates' development, and who is all of the tutelage giver, instructor, who loves their students, who really enjoys the process of teaching themselves. That was the third and kind of very interesting approach to development.
You know, Jack, I was thinking parents fall into these three buckets too.
Yeah.
They really do. As you think about that, the first part of our self-assessment looked at your preference for one of these approaches over another. And, you know, again, on this, your score on this was from 0 to 16. And Jack, what's your guess for what is the most common here? What's the highest score? What do you think?
My hunch is going to be that we'll see most people fall in the supporter realm, and I don't know. I think maybe those who want to be directly hands-on and teachers, that may be the bottom of the three, but we'll see. We'll have to see.
Yeah, when you think about developing others, it sounds like you're the teacher, right? But actually the highest score here, you know, I looked at a sample of people who had completed the assessment early. 55% indicated their highest score was a supporter or champion, and you love that. And boy, at the soccer game, you see those parents, you know, you can do it, right? But then you also see the teachers, right? That they're you know, after the game, they're going home and no, you kick it like this and kick it like that. The challenger, you know, that's the parent who signs them up for the other league, you know, and puts them in the game. And you know, those are three different styles. By the way, the challenger for this group was the least common as the high score. The average score for the three was supporter 9.5, challenger 6.2, and teacher 8.6 was the averages for those three. But you can get an idea of what you like to do. Let me show you some data around these three. Again, I took the data from 73,000 leaders, and I just looked at the percentage that had the highest score on the 360 assessments. This wasn't our assessment here, but it was the 360 assessments, and it kind of followed suit. 40% had a higher score in support, 31% in challenger, and 29% in expert teacher. What's interesting about that is all three are used, but I mean, there's not one extremely dominant approach that people use. But if you looked at the impact, the graph on the right shows you the impact of the three approaches. And you can see that the people that were supporters or champions, the average, their score on developing others was at the 58th percentile, challengers at the 45th, and expert teachers at the 45th. So you can look at that and you can say, well, all three are helpful. And in fact, that's the next study I did, because I looked at if you were terrible at any one of the three approaches. And it turns out if you have a fatal flaw, a critical weakness on any one of the three, your skill at developing others was at the 13th percentile. And the message there is, if there's any one of those three you're bad at, you better improve it. It's going to hurt your ability to develop others. But if you were above average, now just 50th percentile or higher on one, your score on developing others went to 46, two went to 54, three, it goes to 78th percentile. So the message there is what? Well, to me, it's don't do one of these. I mean, sometimes you are the expert teacher. That's good, but be the supporter too. Sometimes, and if you're not challenging people, we need challenge. We need people to say, come on, here's a really tough assignment. That challenger is important. And Jack, I'll bet there's I can think of lots of experiences I've had where a leader challenged me, and it really, I thank them for that.
Right. Okay, let's dive into some of the things that we discovered. The number one most useful skill in developing others, Adam, is effectively giving others feedback. But let me alert you that this is not quite as simple or as easy or straightforward as it may sound at first blush. Because people have widely different views of feedback. They have widely different views about what that means. They have widely different views about which kind is best. For example, let me pose to you the question. We asked this question of a number of people. The thing that would help most employees to improve performance is A, being given specific constructive suggestions about how to improve, or B, being given regular recognition and praise. So think to yourself, which of those two do you believe is really most helpful in improving performance? The responses that we received from 9,500 managers were A, 82% said A, giving specific constructive suggestions about how to improve. 18% said B, being given regular recognition and praise. So we see that there's a strong kind of leaning toward people seeing that valuable feedback is specific, constructive suggestions about how to improve. Let's engage in a little poll. Which approach do you think most leaders prefer, therefore? Giving negative feedback or giving positive feedback? Negative feedback being, corrective feedback, suggestions, you can do this better. There's something you're not doing. Your style, your method needs to be changed. Or B, praise, recognition, kudos, approbation. Which approach do most leaders prefer? Would you please weigh in with your answers?
This isn't a hard question, is it?
Okay. So it looks like, which approach do most leaders prefer? Very, very interesting. Well, Joe, we'll let you kind of take it from there and show people what we had received in the way of data from our earlier studies.
Well,
this group may not be exactly kind of representative or the same as that group.
77% think it's positive feedback. Well, let me show you the data here. All right, so here's what we did. We developed a self-assessment that measured your preference for giving or avoiding giving positive feedback or negative feedback. So over here you have positive feedback, and again you have avoids, neutral, or gives. So you have a preference for giving or avoiding. So when we looked at the data, and this is from 9,000 people, so it's not exactly just a small assessment. it shows. And again, we didn't ask the question we asked you, do you like positive or negative? We asked specific kinds of questions of would you do A or B or A or B? And one was positive, one was negative. So here's what we found. 37% of the people in this 9,500 person group tended to avoid giving positive feedback. And you scratch your head and say, why would you avoid giving people positive feedback? I mean, isn't that easy to say, hey, good job, Jack? Why do you think people avoid it?
Oh, I think sometimes they fear that if I give people positive feedback, that they're going to instantly say, "Oh, I want a raise," or "I deserve to be, promoted." I think that they are afraid that it'll be perceived as flattery, that I'm just blowing smoke at you rather than really being genuinely sincere. So I think there are some reasons that people have for avoiding giving positive feedback.
Well, and here's the the negative feedback. 63% of the people in this sample said they prefer to give negative feedback. They want to. They prefer to give negative feedback. And I think for a lot of people, they believe that's their job. I mean, that's why they are a manager. They're supposed to tell people, if they made a mistake. I mean, that's being a responsible leader, I think. I think that's what that is.
The late Abraham Maslow, the person who kind of invented the term self-actualization and Maslow's need hierarchy, had this kind of favorite saying, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And sometimes the managers, like you say, they think that giving constructive, corrective feedback is their hammer as a leader. So if there's one insight that you leave with from this webinar today, it would be, I think, to realize that this belief that giving corrective feedback is more valuable or effective than giving praise and reinforcement, that's not a correct belief. If you personally prefer giving negative or corrective feedback, I hope that you will leave today's webinar with the insight that maybe I am underestimating the value of praise, commendation, reinforcement. So I'm delighted to see the responses from this group today, Joe, because it looks like they've got it more right than our previous respondents did.
They have drunk the Kool-Aid.
That's right.
So let's show you the data here. And we're going to ask you another question here. What percentage of those who prefer to give negative feedback assess themselves as they are effective at giving feedback? How would, what would you think? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? So what percentage who give negative feedback think they're really good at it? They're good at giving feedback. They rate themselves high. And Terry, I think we've got that now. Let's see the results here. Okay. 69%. Well, okay, that's good. That's what that meant. So let me show you the data here, because the study is interesting. We asked themselves to rate their effectiveness at giving. And so the question was, I would rate myself as effective at giving others honest, straightforward feedback. And they agreed or disagreed with that. And so we're going to show you the percentage of people who agree or disagree. And then we broke people into these four groups. And the four groups were avoids giving positive, avoids giving negative. So these people just don't want to give feedback. And only 31% said they were effective. Now, if people said, I avoid giving positive, but I give negative, 72% said they were good at it. Now, for those people that give positive, but avoid giving negative, 40% agreed. And the insight out of that is those people who tended to avoid giving negative feedback didn't think they were good at it. They were saying, you know, I'm not great at giving feedback, and the people that gave both positive and negative, 78% thought they were good. So that shows us something that I believe the insight here is that people that give negative feedback think they're better at it.
And our message, our strong message is to that third group, that the third bar, those who give positive feedback and avoid giving negative. Don't be so harsh on yourselves.
Yeah.
Because you're really better at it than you think. Giving feedback doesn't mean being a critic.
It doesn't. And well, let's show the data. So here's what we did. We took the self-assessment data and we merged it with 360 assessments from others. Okay. So we've got these people that avoid and prefer giving positive and negative feedback. And so what we have is on average 13 evaluations from others. And we ask the item is effective at giving honest feedback in a helpful way. This is great. So watch what happened. Avoids. They're at the 41st percentile. Avoids giving positive, prefers to give negative. Now, remember, this is a high group. They were at 72nd percentile. They're at the 36th percentile. They're rated as less effective. People that avoided, that gave positive and avoided negative, they're at the 53rd percentile. And the people that did both are at the 52nd percentile. You've got to have some insights out of this. It's like when you look at the impact you have on others, those that preferred negative and avoided positive, people, you know, they said you're not very good at giving feedback. Jack, any other insights on this?
No, I'll share a couple of thoughts in just a moment when you do this last slide here.
Okay, so leaders who gave no feedback at all were rated more effective overall by others than those who gave only negative feedback. What do you think? If people said, I don't like positive, I don't like negative, would they actually be rated better than people that gave negative feedback? True or false? What do you think? True or false? All right. Terry, what have we got? Okay. The majority, 56%, think that's false. And here's the data. It's false. You know, what we see here is on our data here. If you avoided giving positive, avoided giving negative, your average overall leadership effectiveness was at the 42nd percentile. If you preferred giving negative and avoided positive, you're at the 36th percentile. You're rated less effective in general as a leader. So your, desire to sort of tell people what's wrong, guess what it got you? It got you lower ratings. You were perceived as less effective as a leader. People who gave positive and avoided negative, 49th percentile. And people that gave both positive and negative, 46th percentile. The highest group is the people that avoided giving negative and preferred giving positive. That's really interesting. And, so Jack, what are the implications?
I've thought about this, and my conclusion is this, that when people have a preference for giving negative feedback, it ends up that they have people feeling like they're constantly being judged, that they're not respected, that the leader is only looking for what's wrong. And I believe that one of the fundamental principles of being an effective leader is that you treat people with the utmost of respect. And, almost regardless of the situation, if I set myself up in a position to give you ideas or suggestions or correction, I have set myself above you. I have put myself in a superior position. And that's what's wrong with many of our performance management, performance appraisal systems, is that they elevate one person over the other. And my taking upon myself the right to evaluate your performance really creates a separation between the two of us. So I think that the dangers of giving corrective feedback only are that it damages the relationship. It puts people in a negative mood, which reduces their kind of enthusiasm and excitement about their work. I think corrective messages trigger kind of a threat response within people, which releases the wrong kinds of enzymes and chemicals into our bloodstream. And that happens, instantaneously, not always logically. I think this is very much in harmony with the research from people in other disciplines. For instance, the John Gottman research. Those of you who are all students of the world of marriage and marriage therapy, John Gottman is a well-known marriage counselor and researcher. He observed hundreds of thousands of married couples and kind of videotaped them as they interacted with each other. And he just simply counted the number of positive and negative comments that they made to each other. And he found that if a married couple had a 5-to-1 positive to negative interaction ratio, the probability that they would stay together was significantly higher than those who were more critical of and made negative comments about each other. In fact, Gottman is well known because of his accuracy at predicting whether couples would eventually divorce. Scaringly accurate in terms of predicting who would end in divorce in a certain period of time. So,
Jack, I found it doesn't work if you have some negative feedback for your wife. You go in and you say 5 compliments and then give her it doesn't work.
It has to be more than that.
Yeah, you need some space.
So we would invite you, again, as what you can walk away from your own experience here with us today in this webinar. Examine your own preferences. We found, again, you know that 37% of leaders prefer to avoid giving negative feedback, or avoid giving positive feedback. If you're one of those, please rethink your approach. We found that there was 63% of leaders have a strong preference for giving negative or corrective feedback. And when they do it, they think they're really good at giving feedback. And we found from the data that we have, that's just not so. So we hope that you'll examine your own assumptions about, what do I do? What do I not do? So some suggestions about things that you might consider as you kind of move forward. Consider your attitudes and beliefs about giving positive versus negative feedback, and how your attitudes maybe lead you to certain behaviors as you go forward. Look for more opportunities to give positive feedback to your group. Look for those opportunities. Think about the number of times you give positive compliments, commendation, kudos, versus criticism or complaints or suggestions for changing things or doing things that they're not doing. Kind of set your own target for at least 2 times more positive comments than those that would be negative. Identify, others who are skilled at giving positive feedback. Observe what they do. Take a good lesson from them. If you're at all close to them, ask for their suggestions about how do they find it so comfortable to give positive feedback to their colleagues. And finally, if you can build up a positive feedback bank account, if you can give your colleagues positive commendation, we believe that kind of creates this reservoir of goodwill that then puts you in a much better position when you do have some important message that maybe would be corrective feedback. It seems to go down a lot better when you've got a lot in the bank.
Yeah, Jack, it wasn't 5-0. It was 5-1. So
Yeah.
there is a place for corrective feedback.
Yep.
And you know, as I think about it, if you have a direct report, 90% of the work is done right, 10% wrong. Shouldn't that mirror your feedback? I mean, shouldn't you be giving 9 compliments to one corrective kind of thing? I mean, most people don't do most of the things wrong. They actually do most of the things right. And it's just an interesting habit to try to develop. And I think it can help everyone. But this frame we have of, you know, as a manager, it's my job to tell people what's going on. You know, that's, I think that's hurting people. It's not helping them. Well, how can I improve? As you think about it, you know, just ask all team members where they are in their career, or watch a TED talk on with all of your team members, or have team members read What Color is My Parachute, which talks about career opportunities, or encourage team members to take night classes. Does that help people develop? Well, it might help a little bit. It might do something. But what specific actions can you take that are going to make a real difference? And what we've done is researched over 1 million raters and 110,000 leaders. And what we were searching for were something we called companion behaviors or strength builders. And we're like the term strength builders because when you engage in these behaviors, it really helps you to be better at developing others. And what we found were these 5 different behaviors. Jack, tell us about these.
Yeah, so once again, just the concept is, if you identify those people who are perceived by their colleagues as really being good at developing others, what else do they do? What are the other behaviors that are extremely highly correlated with these people who get such high scores on developing others? And what our research showed was that they fell into 5 areas, and you see them before you on the screen. And so let's take each one at a time and just talk a bit about it. The first one was that these leaders who are so good at developing others tend to be inspirational and motivational. They praise, they give recognition. This very much links into what we've been talking about in terms of the kind of feedback that they're good at giving. They tend to give that far more than corrective feedback. It's also that they motivate people by focusing on the purpose of the organization, the cause, the mission that it's involved in. So they serve as a source of inspiration because they link people to that broader purpose or cause. Joe, the second?
The second is concern and consideration for others. If your manager asks you to do something that's difficult, learn a new skill, that's going to take time and effort on your part. You know, if you don't like that manager, you're thinking, they're just trying to get me. You think of all kinds of ulterior motives. What are they trying to do, or why are they doing that? If you have a positive relationship with that person, they're believing they care about you. They're concerned. They're wanting to help you. And again, that whole idea of care and consideration for others, a big approach to helping people develop. It's significant. And this is especially expressed in coaching skills with others in terms of showing your concern and showing your care for others. So a big issue and a really important strength builder.
The third one was that we've known for a long time that effective leadership very much centered around the communication process, that leaders who are good at communicating complex ideas and messages are more effective, that those who are open and more transparent are more influential, that when people will take the time to explain things, that they're willing to repeat it when necessary, that they're willing to share their experiences and their ideas, that when those things happen, they become much more effective at developing others than those who are more taciturn and more reluctant to communicate openly.
You know, Jack, we've had such a strong discussion about inclusion and valuing diversity. This is real. And as you think about, have I had some biases towards women or towards people of color or towards older people or to, you know, about sexual orientation around and developing others is such a valuable trait. It's such an important thing. And there ought to be equity in how that is done with others. Now, our research on valuing diversity is that leaders who score at the bottom quartile on their ability to value diversity think they're at the 44th percentile. They give their own self score much higher. So being aware that you're not being equal around this, that you're giving some people favorable assignments, this is a problem, and it's something we all need to face up to and be aware of.
The fifth cluster of behavior had to do with learning agility. You know, it may sound strange, but those leaders who are focused on their own personal development were consistently shown to be more effective at developing others. Maybe it's that we take their example, we use their example, but leaders who are intellectually curious, who are voracious readers, who are always in search of the latest and best thinking, they're the ones that really seem to be very effective at developing their colleagues. And so by setting the example, by practicing it themselves, they encourage others toward their development.
Well, thank you, Jack. And here we have in the self-assessment, what we did is we asked you to rate your effectiveness on these 5 strength builders. And as you can see, it gives you your scores on each one of these. As you think about that, we use 2 items to assess each of these kind of qualities, and the score ranges from 1 to 5. So a high score indicates you feel like you're really effective, and a low score, you know, would feel like you're ineffective. And as you think about that, I want you to be aware that we've also provided you the average scores or the norms based on 110,000 people. And so you can see how your score compares to the norms. You might want to be aware that a low score, you'd say, well, that's a 1 or a 2. Yeah, that is. But in our data, usually a 3 is something that's a problem area. It's something, you know, because people expect you to be better than competent on these issues. So you might take a look at something you might have a 3 on. But this will give you a read on these 5 behaviors, and these are going to help you to improve your effectiveness. So what's the impact of these behaviors on developing others? Well, if you have a fatal flaw on any one of these 5 behaviors, your effectiveness at developing others is the 24th percentile, okay? The solution is, if you have a fatal flaw in one of these, you better fix it. It's a developmental priority. You better go for it, okay? But if you're above average on just one, your effectiveness at developing others goes to the 40th percentile, 2, 50th, 3, 60th. But wonder if you're at the 75th percentile on one. Well, actually, that's another way to get to the 75th percentile. You know, we believe in strength building, this idea that you don't need to be perfect at everything. And so look what happens if you're really good at one, just one of those companion behaviors. Your score on developing others goes to the 76th percentile, and 2 to the 84th, and 3 to the 90th. So as you think about improving, think about the impact of being really good at a few of these, as long as you don't have a fatal flaw in any one of these. So I put this chart together just in case not anybody was confused at this point, because this is a little complex, but I wanted to integrate the 3 approaches with the 5 strength builders. And what I've done here is, for people that were low on one of the approaches and they wanted to improve it, the question is, well, which companion behaviors or which strength builders would work the best for me? And so if you're a supporter champion, the number 1 best companion behavior or strength builder was concern and consideration for others. That makes a lot of sense. But the other 2 that would be work, and they're the green bars there, would be inspires and motivates others or practicing inclusion. If you're challenger, if you wanted to be better at being a challenger, then learning agility would be your first your choice, and communicates powerfully, the second and third choice. Expert teacher, number 1, inspires, and number 2 and 3, communicates and listening. So all this is based on correlations between the approach and the strength builders, and the highest correlations are how we got these scores. So that might give you a guide to choosing one of these over another.
Okay, so as we kind of come to the conclusion of our webinar today, let's just think a little bit about what you've heard. We've recommended to you that if you kind of sense you might have a fatal flaw on any one of these strength building behaviors, that you might want to start there. But assuming you don't, then which behavior could you select that would have the most positive impact on your current performance, your current job? And the third thing to consider as you kind of think about this is, what are you reasonably passionate about improving? What would really give you the most kick about getting better at? So as you think about those 3 kind of screens, we would just be curious, if you don't mind, to tell us, which strength will you be most likely to work on? Which one would you choose to work on? So we're just curious about which has struck you as being most helpful at this stage in your career right now. So the 5 are listed there. And if you would be gracious enough to weigh in, we would appreciate that.
What's your guess on number 1, Jack?
My guess on number 1 is inspires and motivates, but we'll see here.
That's a good one. That's good.
And my second would be maybe learning agility, but we'll see here.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. Oh, you were right.
I was right on the first one, but not the last. Okay. Well, thank you very much for kind of sharing with us your current leaning. So when you complete the exit survey, you will get a link to being able to download a little development guide that we have prepared. So if you would like some concrete, practical, actionable suggestions for how you might develop that strength building behavior, you can get that when you complete the exit survey.
Jack, I've talked to a lot of people, and one of the things as they retire that they seem to be most proud of are those people that they really helped learn new skills and develop new skills. I mean, that is such a crowning glory in terms of leaving a job.
Well, exactly. And that's why we've concluded our comments just before we turn the time to Jill. Harvey Firestone, the founder of the Firestone Tire Company, thinking about his legacy in the organization, said, "It is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed." People can be successful during their lifetime, but when they depart, sometimes the organization collapses. And it's only when we develop the next generation that we have permanently succeeded. So Jill, we're going to turn the time to you and let you kind of just let people know about this wonderful offer we have. So here we go.
Well, Jack, Joe, thank you very much. And as promised, you shared a wealth of data and lots of perspectives for us to consider, and we appreciate it. And thank you to those of you who joined us and were part of the very active chat. In the session today, we started by looking at 3 styles used for developing others and by soccer parents, as Joe commented. Then we had a robust discussion about preferences for giving feedback, that leaders have a clear preference, and the plea to really think about what your preference is and stretch a little bit and consider giving more positive feedback. And then the third section, Jack and Joe shared strengths finders to help empower you in your ability to develop others. So much good richness in this, and you will get a copy of the link once you complete the exit survey, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. So feel free to come back and listen again. But also wanted to share this idea for taking insight, because you might be thinking, what can you do next? What can you do in your organization? What kind of development will make a difference? And so we propose that you consider offering elevating feedback to your managers and supervisors. We offer it in 2 3-hour virtual, live online, very interactive sessions, and participants get a sense of what their preferences are, learn patterns for reinforcing feedback, talk about when it's appropriate and rules of engagement for redirecting feedback, and practice and gain confidence in this really important skill set. So to help you do that, we are offering an elevating feedback workshop for you, delivered by a Zenger Folkman facilitator, and you can include up to 15 of your colleagues for $5,000. And that represents quite a substantial savings off the standard fee of $8,750. And we just need to get it scheduled before the end of the year. Now, to get more information about that and to give us the very important feedback that we seek about how useful today's session was for you, please go to the exit survey that will open as soon as we close out this presentation, or you can copy this link, bit.ly/OCT-ZF, and that link is also in chat. When you give us your feedback, you'll also get a copy of the development guide that Jack and Joe talked about and more information about our offer. So thank you. Great to have everybody join us today.